The day I signed the contract for my first home, the first person who called me wasn't someone who loved me. It was my mother, and she only wanted to know whether I'd put my brother's name on it. The late afternoon sun was slipping down the sky when I stepped out of the realtor's office. The closing folder pressed tightly against my ribs as if it were something fragile, something that could float away if I didn't hold on hard enough. My hands were still trembling, half from disbelief, half from relief. 8 years of grinding through freelance deadlines, skipping holidays, refusing vacations, living on store-brand cereal and second-hand furniture. All of it had finally brought me to this single, breathtaking moment. I had bought a home. A small place, nothing fancy, nothing anyone would boast about at parties. But it was mine in a way nothing had ever been before. I sank into the driver's seat of my old sedan, let my head rest against the worn headrest, and allowed myself one slow exhale, the kind that escapes only when you have crossed a finish line no one else thought you'd reach. For a moment, I let myself imagine a world where my mother would actually celebrate me, congratulate me, maybe even say she was proud. So when the phone rang, I didn't check the screen. I answered with a smile, "Hi, Mom," but instead of warmth, her voice cut sharp and direct, as if she were checking on some administrative chore. "You put Graham's name on the deed, right?" It felt like someone snapped something inside me. I blinked, the smile still hanging stupidly on my face. "What?" I managed. My mother sighed the way she always did when she believed I was being unreasonable. "Hazel, it just makes sense. Graham is the man of the family. You're still single. If anything happens, he should be the one listed as owner. It's smarter that way." There it was, the old script. The same tired, suffocating logic I'd grown up with. Graham, the chosen one, the future patriarch, the boy destined for greatness. Despite never accomplishing anything, he didn't immediately quit. And me, the daughter who would figure things out, the daughter who didn't need help, the daughter whose accomplishments were always treated like temporary placeholders until Graham needed something else to stand on. "I bought this house for myself," I said, slow and deliberate, as if dragging each word uphill. She didn't budge. "Don't be dramatic. He'll take care of it. You know, girls come and go, Hazel, but Graham is family." When the call ended abrupt, empty, without a congratulations, I stayed in the car for what felt like an hour. The sun slipped lower, shadows crawling across the dashboard. I stared at the folder in my lap, at the ink bearing my name, and suddenly every sacrifice flashed through my mind like an ugly slideshow. The nights eating instant noodles because I was saving for a down payment. The birthdays I spent alone because holiday work paid more. The years watching Graham fail classes, quit programs, sleep until noon, while I held myself together with cheap coffee and stubborn hope. And still, even now, they thought he deserved more than I did. That realization hit harder than anything else. It wasn't just about the house. It was about every time. My achievements were treated like borrowed assets waiting to be reassigned to my brother. That night, surrounded by half-packed boxes in my cluttered apartment, I opened an old college notebook labeled Plans and Survival. Inside were pages filled with budget charts, little pep talks, and sketches of spaces I hoped to design someday. Near the back was a single sentence I'd scribbled during a lonely, late-night shift when I'd missed my own birthday to work overtime. "One day, I'll own something no one can take from me." Reading it felt like swallowing a lump of fire. Because after all these years, I finally had that something, and they were already trying to erase my name from it. The next morning, I drove to my new house. The place smelled faintly of dust and fresh paint. Sunlight streaked across the empty hardwood floors, illuminating every corner like an unspoken promise. I walked from room to room, slow, deliberate, touching the walls, the windowsills, the kitchen counter. And in the quiet, I said it out loud, not to anyone but myself. "This is mine. Not Graham's, not my mother's, mine." I didn't know what would come next, but I knew one thing with terrifying clarity. I wasn't giving up this time. The days after the closing felt strangely heavy, as if the excitement I'd carried out of the realtor's office had evaporated into the air the second my mother's voice cut through it. I didn't tell anyone about the house. I didn't post it, didn't casually mention it to friends, didn't breathe a word. Part of me wanted to protect the fragile sense of pride I hadn't even fully tasted yet. Another part knew exactly what would happen if my family found out too soon. Even so, I couldn't avoid the inevitable Saturday family gathering, one of those unspoken obligations that had followed me my whole life. The moment I stepped into my parents' backyard, surrounded by folding tables and cheap patio lights, it hit me again, the familiar dynamic where I became invisible the second I crossed the threshold. People asked Graham about his projects, about his life, even when he didn't have much to say beyond vague promises and half-formed plans. When they turned to me, it was always the same dismissive tone. "Still doing that online design thing?" as if my career existed in the same category as a hobby someone would grow out of. I laughed politely, nodded, played along. It was easier than explaining myself to people who never cared to understand in the first place, but mothers always notice. After dessert, she cornered me in the kitchen, closing the door with that quiet click that always meant trouble. Her eyes narrowed, scanning me the way she used to when she thought I was hiding something as a child. "You've been quiet, Hazel. What's going on?" I told her the truth. Just one sentence. I bought a house. Instead of pride, her face hardened into something sharp and calculating. "Where?" She didn't ask how or when, or whether I was proud. She asked where, as if she were mapping it out like an asset. When I gave the neighborhood, she mentally tallied numbers, value, future resale. Then, without missing a beat, she struck. "So when are you transferring it to Graham's name?" It was like someone slammed a door inside my chest. I stared at her, stunned. "Mom, why would I?" She spoke slowly, like explaining something obvious to a child. "Hazel, he's the one who will build a family. You won't stay in the area forever. It makes sense for him to have stability. You're the flexible one, the one who understood, the one who gave things up without complaint." I walked out of the kitchen without responding, the noise of the family gathering blurring into a single muffled hum behind me. I got into my car, drove home in silence, and sat on my bed with the lights off, heart pounding with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. I didn't have the vocabulary for yet, but the next morning, the storm truly began. Mom texted first. "Graham says you're confused. Think again." Dad followed. "You need to put family first." Then a nan I hadn't spoken to in ages chimed in. "Selfishness doesn't look good on you, Hazel." But the worst part was Graham's call. He sounded so sure of the story my parents had crafted for him that he didn't even consider I might have a different truth. "You know putting it under my name is the smart thing. Taxes, future planning. You don't need all that space anyway." "Stop," I snapped. The silence on the line was instant. "Hazel, don't make this dramatic," he said, offended. "You've always been so self-centered. This is a family matter." Self-centered. Because I wouldn't hand over something I worked nearly a decade for. By the time I hung up, something had shifted inside me. The part that used to doubt myself, the part that wondered if maybe I really was being ungrateful or emotional, went quiet. What replaced it was clarity so sharp it felt like a blade. They were never going to see me unless I forced them to. That afternoon, I drove to the county records office with every document I had. I requested a legal lock on the title, my name, and only my name. No alterations, no co-owners, no backdoor permissions. I had a real estate attorney, Amanda's husband, look over everything twice. When the clerk stamped the final page, I felt something settle in my chest for the first time in years. A grounding. A claim. That evening, at home, I slid the documents into a fireproof safe I'd installed in my new walk-in closet. As I turned the key, hearing the low metallic click, I felt an unfamiliar warmth spread through me. For the first time in my life, nothing they said could take something from me. The group text arrived late Wednesday afternoon, short and cold enough to sting. "Family dinner tomorrow. Important. Be here, Mom." It wasn't an invitation. It was a command, a summons. And I understood exactly what the important meant: an intervention, a correction. They fully expected I would walk in, absorb every guilt trip, and eventually fold the way I always had. Amanda told me not to go. "Hazel, you don't owe them that stage. Let them talk to empty chairs." But I knew I had to walk into that house one more time, not to be convinced, but to close a chapter I'd been stuck in for decades. If I didn't show up, they would twist the narrative until I became the villain they needed me to be. And I refused to hand them that. So Thursday evening, I stood in front of my closet, staring at my clothes as if they were armor. I chose a slate gray blazer, clean lines, sharp shoulders. I tied my hair back low, no earrings, no softness. Only an envelope in my bag containing the stamped confirmation of the deed. Lock, the proof, the declaration, the end. The moment I stepped through my parents' front door, I felt the shift in air, heavy, anticipatory, suffocating. No laughter, no casual chatter. Everyone was already seated at the dining table as if they were waiting for court to begin. Graham leaned back in his chair with the kind of smug half-smile that made my blood quiet instead of hot. "Well," he said, tapping the side of his glass, "do you have something you want to say first?" The condescension in his voice almost made me laugh. Almost. I placed the envelope on the table with deliberate calm. "Yes," I said. "I came to tell you this once. The house is mine, legally locked under my name. No one can change it." Silence slammed into the room. My father's face stiffened, red creeping into his cheeks. My mother looked like someone had pulled the ground out from under her. Graham blinked, the smirk fading as if his script had suddenly lost all its lines. Then the eruption came. Dad's voice hit first. "Hazel, This is unacceptable. You don't talk to us before making decisions like this? I held his gaze. I bought the house. I made the decision. He slammed his hand onto the table. Your brother is a grown man who can buy his own house if he wants one, I snapped, my voice sharp enough to cut. Mom tried to intervene with her favorite shield tradition. Hazel, please listen. This is how our family has always worked. Graham carries the family name. He will settle. He is. I turned to her fully. And what am I, Mom? The spare? The daughter who's supposed to survive on scraps of pride while everything I achieve is redirected to Graham like a family tax? That landed hard. For a moment, I saw something crack in her expression, shock, maybe recognition, maybe guilt, but she looked away before I could read it. Graham finally lost his composure. You're making this dramatic. Why would you even lock the title? That's extreme. I leaned forward slightly. Because I know exactly what would happen if I didn't. He shut his mouth. And that silence tasted like victory, not petty revenge, not triumph. Just truth finally breathing. I opened the envelope, slid the documents onto the table. This is the final copy. Official. The county has confirmed. The house is mine. There is nothing left to argue. Mom's voice trembled for the first time. Hazel, if you walk away from this, you walk away from the family. I stood still, letting the weight of that manipulation hang in the air. Then I answered softly, deadly softly, the way only truth can sound. No, Mom. You walked away from me a long time ago. I'm just not pretending anymore. No one knew what to say. No one stopped me when I stood up. No one followed as I walked out the front door. On the porch, the cool night air hit my skin, and for the first time in years, I felt something like breathing, not survival, not endurance, but the quiet, anchoring breath of someone who had finally chosen herself. And behind me, through the closed door, their silence, shocked, hollow, defeated, followed me out like the last echo of a life I no longer belonged to. In the weeks that followed, the world felt different, not because anything outside had changed, but because I had. The house, once an empty echo of hardwood and fresh paint, gradually soaked in the calm I had never been allowed to experience growing up. Each morning, sunlight spilled through the kitchen windows like a quiet blessing. Each night, I fell asleep knowing no one could appear out of nowhere to claim what I had built. There was no tension, no guilt, hovering like a shadow, no expectations waiting to crush me the moment I faltered. Then one evening, while I was marinating chicken for dinner, my phone rang. Mom. I stared at the name flashing on the screen. Old instincts, the ones trained by years of emotional obedience, told me to brace myself. But another part of me, the new part, the part forged on that porch weeks ago, simply breathed. I answered calmly, hello, Mom. For the first time in my life, her voice wasn't sharp, or disappointed, or authoritative. It was small, fragile. Hazel. I wanted to say I'm sorry. 3 seconds of silence. Heavy. I didn't treat you fairly, she continued. I was wrong. We thought we were protecting Graham, but we didn't realize we were hurting you. I didn't speak right away. I didn't rush to fill the silence, something I used to do to make her comfortable. I'm not angry, I finally said, but I'm not going back to how things were. Her breath hitched, soft and unsure. I know. I just hope, someday, we can mend things. We'll see, I said gently. But I'm done shrinking for this family. 2 weeks later, Graham texted, I'm sorry. Truly, I'm proud of you. I stared at the message for a long time, not because it hurt, but because it didn't. I replied, I hope you grow from this. Nothing more, nothing less. The rope that tied us together had frayed, but it no longer strangled me. Life moved forward in a way I didn't expect. I was invited to a statewide interior design summit, a recognition I had never thought I'd receive. I ironed my best blazer and drove to the event with a quiet confidence. The kind that comes not from being praised, but from surviving. What tried to bury you? During the ceremony, when they called my name, Hazel Rowan, excellence in independent design, I walked to the stage under warm lights and soft applause that felt like balm. And there in the back row, sat my parents. They didn't wave. I didn't approach them. But our eyes met, and I saw something I had never seen before. Not entitlement, not dismissal, just understanding and loss. They knew what they had forfeited the moment they tried to strip me of what was mine. Later that night, as I walked alone to my car in the dimly lit parking lot, I felt a presence nearby. Graham stepped forward, hands in his pockets, expression stripped of arrogance. Hazel, he said softly, I really am sorry. I nodded. We all have to grow up sometime. He looked down, then back at me. You deserved better. I never saw it before. I know, I said. Good night, Graham, and I walked away. The next morning, I sat barefoot on my back porch with a warm mug between my palms. The lavender I planted weeks earlier swayed gently in the breeze. I felt grounded in a way I had never known. Not because I had won, But because I had chosen myself again and again until the world finally shifted around me, I took out my phone and wrote a note I knew I would keep forever. They once said I was nothing beside him, but I became someone they couldn't diminish, someone I finally respect, and for the first time in my entire life, I felt free in a way that didn't demand permission.